Well, good morning, everyone. Probably my speech will be a little bit from another planet, but I'm very honored to share with you some thoughts about safety, compliance, details, regulations, and responsibility. So the fact that I'm here costs our little company several thousand euros, and for 16 minutes, but we think it's worth it. Our authority recommended that we share some thoughts here. They said if you have something to say, here would be the right place. The right place where you can actually change things, we don't know. So I will simplify it. I fly helicopters, and that's my passion. And it's not rocket science. It's about a fascinating tool which requires a lot of science to build, as we heard in the speech before. But we should not confuse this with the work in the cockpit. So piloting a helicopter requires, from my point of view, two things: piloting skills and good judgment to return safe home in the evening. These are the basics, and the current law regulates a lot more. But does it regulate what it should regulate? Most of the pilots I know, they feel quite helpless about the whole regulation framework with EASA. And therefore, the picture of the castle in the air is beautiful, it's big, but there's no real fundament. And I will try to pass a message about where I would see some more fundament in the regulations. The fact that I'm here has two reasons. First one, and most important, is the keynote speech from Patrick Key from last year, when he claims that the accident statistics in our industry have been the same over the last 10 years. And I heard this several times also in the speeches from yesterday. And this is actually a devastating statement. So in my little world as a pilot, I know how complex the regulations over the last 10 years have gotten and how much money and effort my employers have to spend to bring me in the air with all these requirements. And the result is not visible in better accident statistics. Well, the second reason, since 18 years, I'm also a consultant for organizational development and change processes. So therefore, I'm professionally naive, and I dare to question things which others just accept. My speech is a pleading for a complete rethinking of the FCL process and an approach for more structure and standards for our pilots. They are the most dangerous thing in the helicopter, and they are the core decision makers. In all the speeches so far in these 2 days, I heard only in one the approach to focus on the pilot side, and it was a speech from David Abad when he presented the evidence-based training. And I think that's going in the right direction. I say, if we continue to regulate all these details, I say by striving for compliance in this detailed world, we lose the focus for safety, the cost, and the cheating, or let's say the creative interpretation of rules will rise. A good fundament would emphasize more on the training of the core decision maker, the pilot. So that's what I heard. That's stable. I heard there is, you want to reduce the accident rate by 50%. And that's happening in my world. And I don't have much time to show you my approach, but I state we have far too many rules. And we try to regulate the details, but we lose or we have lost the overview. So there's no prioritization of what is important in this big thing. So the second point on the educational fundaments, I believe we do a negative training on our future or also on the existing pilots by point 1. I will explain a little bit how. And in the organizational culture, we had to adapt and as I said, let's find creative ways in dealing with these rules. But usually what I perceive, that's not in the direction of safety. So it is just to be compliant. And I state by striving for compliance, we lose the focus for safety. Our little fleet, I don't know, if the costs for compliance rise into the unknown, the fleet will remain on ground. I'm very convinced there. I will do 3 small examples about the rulemaking. And I was very surprised when you said yesterday, David, that people usually don't have examples where the pain points are in the organizations. So I have some little examples and we'll see. So first one, a very good idea. We have easy access rules which facilitate a little bit our life with the rulemaking, but that's treating a symptom and not the cause. So that's one example for rulemaking. Do we focus on the right things in education? Is flying helicopter really rocket science? So why is it not in the US? And I compared question databases for theory exams. And I did my ATPL IR theory last year with around 11,000 something question database. I do not think it enhanced my flying capabilities. But I have the paper at the end. Third example, if you would, and fascinating wise, this is an example for under-regulation. If you would like to buy a used car, and you like the color, you like the type, you like the price, what would you be looking at else when you buy a car, a used one? I would be looking at how many kilometers has this car been on the road. Would you buy a car with just a stopwatch in it? I'm not sure. And I think that's also, in the organizational culture, this has a huge impact. If you don't know what I'm talking about, probably we'll discuss it in a coffee break somewhere. Let's focus a little bit more on the pilot again. We definitely need skills. We need a little bit of knowledge. That's okay. But that's easy to check, and that's what we usually check: knowledge and skill. I will focus also a little bit on lacking standards, but we can check skill and knowledge. But the main accident factor, I believe, ability to take decisions, I believe we don't focus on that and we don't check it usually. More details. In the AMC-FCL 210H, we have around 13 pages which describe what a private pilot should do as exercises. And when you see, when you read this, and I had to read this because I had to rewrite the PPL syllabus for our company, I was like, I do not understand the logic of it. So why is it is like the student holding a cyclic stick only? Is this part of the ability to hover? I did not get it. So anyway, we were forced to do a syllabus, and to be compliant in this syllabus, we had always to add these AMCs. A little anecdote here. I asked our authority, can someone explain me the logics of that? Because you want us to write the syllabus. They said, no, that's EASA, you have to ask them. So I wrote an official email to EASA. I got an answer, and a very detailed and in-time response saying, well, that's part of the rulemaking, and you should ask your authority. And that's what I call responsibility ping pong, which is happening. So I wanted to talk to someone who feels responsible for that we have this in our regulation, and I didn't find someone. And that's a problem. So when no one is responsible, at the end, when an accident happened, that's always the PIC who is responsible. But anyway, we did it, and I believe we improved it a little bit by adding learning objectives. We defined in the whole exercise, like, what should a student know, what should he be able, and we defined also a standard what he should be able to demonstrate. And again, the FAA knows the practical test standards since years, or airman certification standards, and this is going in this direction. But in Europe, we don't know it, and therefore, I believe we don't have a real standard where we check skills. Let's talk a little bit about decision making. Sorry, I said it's from another planet, Switzerland, a lot of mountains. Backcountry skiing is a good example of how do you develop decision making. And I say it's a very tricky thing. If you know avalanches and you want to go on a slope backcountry, if you're on top and you think, well, should I go or not? If you go back home, you are not really rewarded for this defensive decision. If you go and nothing happens, you don't know how close you were. And if you go and there's an avalanche coming, you know in that moment you were wrong. And that's kind of the same in helicopter flying. So how can you really develop good decision making? And that's a problem. We know the model from comfort zone. You should go into the learning zone, but in a helicopter you should avoid by all means the panic zone. That's where an accident happens. So how do we train good decision making? And again, picture from Swiss mountains, something which we don't distinguish in the checking. An expert skier could have fun on a slope like this. For a beginner would be, it's a possible accident. And in helicopter flying, what I experienced, we do not distinguish that in the checking and in the training phase. So with new tools, we would have the opportunity to do scenario or evidence-based trainings to develop situations where pilots actually can develop good decision-making. And for the time being, I don't see that in most of the operators world who operate small helicopters. Well, probably nor big ones. See. So that's a good opportunity. Check this. Even when you're dead, you get a fine, or probably a finding. Finding in our world is the big ghost where the authority comes and says, you will have a finding. And usually it has nothing to do with safety, it's a finding. Or sometimes when it rains, it has even water on the street. So that's just to show you, we do negative training on our pilots. We try to regulate everything, and common sense and decision-making is lacking. So we make them think that we can regulate everything just by ticking boxes. And probably you get a finding if you do something wrong, but it has nothing to do with safety. So there's a big problem also with the institutional culture. As I said, we find creative ways on being compliant, but probably not safe. And that might be a picture, probably a vision for your company, either the left or the right one. What I perceive currently with EASA rulemaking is this picture. And that makes me think. So my conclusion, the next steps, I heard, or I read the claim from EASA, your safety is our mission. So first of all, I think the big and most important step is to admit that the current system did not bring the expected outcome. If the accident statistic remains the same over the last 10 years, something went drastically wrong. And the same thinking which led to this fact will not bring a change. Oh well, I said I'm professionally naive, so let's redefine FCL. It's not good. In particular, we should define, together with pilots and teaching professionals, flight skill standards throughout all different levels. Proficiency checking, I heard the speech yesterday from Eric Bennett, and unfortunately, I see there were some changes, but it's still very difficult for me. I did not understand the whole thing, and I was not sure if there is a gain in safety if we change these things. So we should change that, and we should definitely develop comprehensive decision-making training as a core competence for the pilot. I know from a organizational consultancy view, it's very, very difficult to stop a system if you don't have the right solution ready, and I don't. But we should start changing things that the graphs in the end would look like this. So remember the first slide with the castle. I believe you need definitely to have a good fundament, and the good fundament starts with the rule making, the basic rules to have a stable house. And I'm very happy to go into discussion anywhere, to share ideas, but I think we should change something. Thank you a lot.